Hey everybody, I wanted to share something with you, this little document. I'm going to go ahead and read for you guys. If you are an electric universe theory fan, I think you'll find this very interesting. Um, what this is kind of the occult view on the electric universe. It's important to understand that Velikovsky and these folks, they didn't come up with the electric universe theory. The electric universe theory has been around for a very, very long time, since ancient times. Now, if you guys are familiar with Helena Blavatsky, Helena Blavatsky wrote a long document called The Secret Doctrine back in the 1880s. Now, a lot of people have given Helena Blavatsky a hard time, but I believe that, in my opinion, that comes primarily from the church, because the Theosophy people and the Jesuits, they're like two opposite ends. And, of course, the church thinks that Theosophy is threatening, so they did everything that they could to basically demonize the hell out of Theosophy. But the purpose of this video as to that, okay, some of this stuff is not going to make sense to you at all if you are an electric universe theory fan, because it's on the occult side of things. Some of it may sound to you religious, perhaps, but Theosophy is not even a religion. Theosophy is more of an understanding of reality. So when you hear things like, when it's being discussed in here, when you hear things as being discussed as an entity or a being or what have you, the easiest way to think about this or visualize it is that imagine your body as being a universe. So what it really consists of then is it consists of your body and all of the organisms and smaller beings that live inside your body, and so on, that basically create a whole universe, which is you. And you have these different levels of consciousness, from the consciousness that runs your whole body to the smaller consciousnesses that each have their own little part inside your body. So the Theosophists see everything in the universe as alive. Everything is beings. Beings within beings within beings. Just like we would think of yourself. When you think of yourself, you're basically a being with beings inside you, with beings inside those, and so on and so on. So that's kind of what to keep in mind here. Now, something else to keep in mind about this, about Theosophy and this occult understanding of electricity, which is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about something which is the most fundamental, and you will find and be very pleased to know, Fohat is what it's called, is probably the most important thing in Theosophy. It is the underlying understanding of how things kind of work in the universe, and it deals with what they call divine electricity. So, it's important for you to understand, as somebody who studies this stuff on the electric universe, to have different perspectives rather than just the mathematical science side. And the reason why this is because it allows you to think of things in a different manner, to put things and pieces of the puzzle together. For example, I can learn a lot about myself by looking at areas of the cosmos. For example, I can take a look at the Orion Nebula, for example, and I can see the importance of myself and my body and the areas of my brain and stuff like this by looking at the Orion Nebula. Now, that may sound crazy to some of you, but it's called Hermetic philosophy. And by knowing yourself, your body, and so forth, you can learn more about the universe and vice versa. So, and the other thing to keep in mind, too, is that what you're going to hear in this document, this has been around for a long time. A lot of this comes from ancient India. It comes from ancient Egypt. A lot of these things. So by knowing this, this will let you know that this electricity stuff that The electric universe, this is not a new theory. It's been around for a very, very long time. And so with that perspective, you're going to see the detail that goes into this thing. These people that have spent long, long times contemplating and understanding it and even experiencing a lot of it. So the concepts you're going to hear in here are before Velikovsky, and they are long before the Thunderbolts Project and people like that even came along. With that in mind, that should give you the idea that other people knew about this. And so even though this perspective may not be what you're used to, you might want to respect it in the sense that people have been looking at this for a long, long time. So let's take a look at what we're going to read here. It's called the electric entity. Remember what I said about entity? And this kind of thing is going to come up over and over. And from the Secret Doctrine, electricity is the work of Fohat, but Fohat is not electricity. So here we go. Life and electricity are one in our philosophy. Electricity is life, and it is death. Fohat is the essence of electricity. Electricity can be called an entity only when we refer to it as Fohat, its primordial force. When an occultist speaks of Fohat, the energizing and guiding intelligence in the universal electric or vital fluid, he is laughed at. Withal, neither the nature of electricity nor of life, nor even of light, were to this day understood. The occultist sees in the manifestation of every force in nature the action of the quality or the special characteristics of its noumenon, which noumenon is a distinct and intelligent individuality on the other side of the mechanical manifested universe. Fohat is the agent of the law, its representative. He is the active potency of the reproductive power in nature. In the manifested universe, Fohat is the ever-present electrical energy, the ceaseless, destructive, and formative power. It is through Fohat that the ideas of the universal mind are impressed upon matter. Fohat is the bridge by which the ideas existing in the divine thought are impressed on cosmic substance as the laws of nature. Primordial matter, before it emerges from the plane of the never manifesting and awakens to the thrill of action under the impulse of Fohat, is but a cool radiance, colorless, formless, tasteless, and devoid of every quality and aspect. It is the electric entity, Fohat, which electrifies into life and separates primordial stuff or pre-genetic matter into atoms, themselves in the source of all life and consciousness. Thus, it is taught in esoteric cosmogony that when the hour strikes for the third logos to appear, from the latent potentiality there radiates a lower field of differentiated consciousness, which is Mahat, universal mind. Mahat is the entire collectivity of those Dian Kohens of sentient life, of which Fohat is the representative on the objective plane, and the Manasapaturas of the subjective. During the period of universal pralaya, cosmic ideation is non-existent. The variously differentiated states of cosmic substance are resolved back into the primary states of abstract potential objectivity. With the reawakening of cosmic ideation, Manvantaric impulse commences concurrently with and parallel to primary emergence of cosmic substance. Fohat, running along the seven principles of Akasha, acts upon manifested substance or the one element, and by differentiating it into various centers of energy, sets in motion the law of cosmic evolution, which, in obedience to the ideation of the universal mind, brings into existence all various states of being in the manifested solar system. Fohat, therefore, is spoken of as the synthetic motor power of all imprisoned life forces, and the medium between the absolute and the conditioned force. It is the link, just as Manas is the connecting link between gross matter of the physical body and the divine monad which animates it, but is powerless to act upon the former directly. Shown in his true character, Fohat proves how deeply versed were all those prehistoric nations in every science of nature now called physical and chemical branches of natural philosophy. He is one of the most, if not the most important character in esoteric cosmogony, as in the oldest Grecian cosmogony, differing widely from later mythology. Eros is the third person in the primeval trinity. Chaos, Gaia, Eros, answering to the Kabbalistic boundless all, space, Shekinah, and Ancient of Days. So Fohat is one thing in the yet unmanifested universe and another phenomenal and occult world. In the latter, he is that occult, electric, vital power, under the will of the creative logos, unites and brings all forms, giving them the first impulse, which becomes in time law. But in the unmanifested universe, Fohat is no more this than Eros is the later brilliant winged Cupid or love. Fohat has naught to do with the cosmos yet, since cosmos is not born, and the gods still sleep in the bosom of the Father-Mother. Cosmos is not born, and the gods, he is an abstract philosophical idea. Now, when they speak of ideas, cosmic ideation, what she's really referring to here is the same thing that we hear from Plato a long time ago, where he talks about the world of ideas and forms. So we're hearing about two things here. We're hearing about cosmic ideation, which is this idea or form. And in this sense, the universe, or whatever is going to be manifested, is still represented as an idea, so it doesn't exist yet. Now, what happens is that in order for it to be manifested, this is where Fohat comes into play. And so one of the things that they typically say is that thought is the rider and Fohat is the steed. So Fohat would be the divine electricity that acts upon the thought or the idea of the manifested universe that's about to come into play. So you have a thought in your head, for example, and you want to make that thought come into reality, then Fohat is what actually does the act of making it come into manifestation. It's the electric force that acts upon the thought. It's the steed, and the thought is the rider. I hope that makes sense to you. He is an abstract philosophical idea. He produces nothing yet by himself. He is simply the potential creative power in virtue of whose actions the nomenon of all future phenomena divides, so to speak, but to reunite in a mystic, supersensuous act and emit the creative ray. When the divine sun breaks forth, and when they say things like sun, or not, you have to understand what they're referring to is you have the sun of something. So you have the sun of what would be considered thought, and thought is divided up into father and mother. So it's a whole different concepts. It's not what you're used to hearing when you're thinking about these religious folks that want to idolize a particular something. What is being referred to here in Theosophy, the sun refers to the son of, or the offspring of, thought. And so this is the way it kind of operates. You hear mother and father mind and things like this. When the divine sun breaks forth, then Fohat becomes the propelling force, as I said. So we have the divine sun, this manifestation coming into being from an idea, and Fohat becomes the propelling force, this divine electricity that acts upon the thought that was in the world of ideas, and then produces the manifestation based on those ideas. The triple one differentiates into the many, and Fohat is transformed into that force which brings together the elemental atoms and makes them aggregate and combine. Fohat is thus the dynamic energy of cosmic ideation, the guiding power transmitted and made manifest through the Dian Kohans, the architects of the visible world. Ziyu becomes Fohat, which means that the one real magical knowledge, or occult wisdom dealing with the eternal truths and primal causes, becomes almost omnipotence when applied in the right direction. Fohat is the personified electrical vital power, the transcendental binding unity of all cosmic energies, on the unseen as on the manifested plane. Thus considered, his reaction resembles on an immense scale that of a living force created by will in those phenomena where their seemingly subjective acts on the seemingly objective and propels it into action. It's kind of what I was describing before. Fohat is not only the living symbol and container of that force, but is looked upon by the occultist as an entity. The forces he acts upon being cosmic, human, and terrestrial, and exercising their influence on all those planes respectively. On the earthly plane, his influence is felt in the magnetic and active force generated by the strong desire of the magnetizer. On the cosmic, it is present in the constructive power that carries out the formation of things, from planetary system down to the glowworm and the simple daisy. The plan in the mind of nature, or in the divine thought, which is what I was referring to earlier, the divine thought, which is this plane that contains the forms or the pattern that the Fohat will use to construct or manifest these things in the physical reality, or the physical plane. To understand something of the nature of cosmic electricity, other properties must be added to those commonly known, including intelligence. Electricity is not only substance, but it is an emanation from an entity, which is neither God nor devil, but one of the numberless entities that rule and guide our world according to the eternal law of karma. When science speaks of evolution through brute matter, blind force, and senseless motion, occultists point to the intelligent law, sentient life, and add that Fohat is the guiding spirit of all this. Fohat is no personal God, but the emanation of those other powers behind him, the messengers of the primordial sons of life and light. The occultists maintain that all the forces of the scientists have their origin in the vital principle, the one life, collectively of our solar system, that life being a portion, or rather one of the aspects, of the one universal life. Fohat is closely related to the one life. Fohat is the constructive force of cosmic electricity. He has 7 sons who are his brothers. The sons of Fohat are the various forces, having Fohatic or cosmic electric life in their essence or being, and in their various effects. They represent and personify the 7 forms, Shakti, of cosmic magnetism, the active and cooperative progeny of whom are electricity, magnetism, sound, light, heat, etc. Occult science defines these as supersensuous effects in their hidden behavior and as objective phenomena in the world of senses. The former require abnormal faculties to perceive them, the latter our ordinary physical senses. Electricity, light, heat, etc. have been aptly termed the ghost or shadow of matter in motion, that is, supersensuous states of matter, whose effects only we are able to cognize. When Fohat is said to produce 7 Laya centers, it means that formative or creative purposes, the great law stops or rather modifies its perpetual motion on 7 invisible points within the area of the manifested universe. The Laya point is what science may call 0 point, or line, the realm of absolute negativeness. Again, Laya may be thought of as the nomenon of undifferentiated cosmic substance, the root and basis of all states of objectivity and subjectivity too, the neutral axis, not one of the many aspects, but its center. The 7 centers of energy are evolved or rendered objective by the action of Fohat upon one element, or in fact the 7th principle, the 7 elements which exist through the manifested cosmos. Fohat is forced to be born time after time whenever any 2 of his sons or brothers indulge in too close contact, whether embrace or a fight. To avoid this, he binds together and unites those of unlike nature and separates those of similar temperaments. This, of course, relates to electricity generated by friction, and to the law involving attraction between 2 objects of unlike and repulsion between those of like polarity. Fohat is called the thread of primeval light, the ball of thread of an Ariadne in this labyrinth of matter. This thread runs along the 7 planes, tying itself into knots, Every plane being septenary, there are thus 49 mystical and physical forces, larger forming stars, suns, and systems, the smaller ones planets, etc. Our sun is one of the countless milliard knots of Fohat. The central sun causes Fohat to collect primordial dust in the form of balls, to impel them to move in converging lines, and finally to approach each other and aggregate, being scattered in space without orders or system. The world germs come into frequent collision until their final aggregation, after which they become wanderers, comets. Then the battles and struggles begin. The older bodies attract the younger, while the others repel them. Many perish, devoured by their stronger companions. Those that escape become worlds. Or again, Fohat runs the Manus, D and Cohen errands. He causes the ideal prototypes to expand from within, without, to cross gradually on a descending scale. All the planes from the nomenon to the lowest phenomenon to bloom finally on the last into full objectivity, the acme of illusion or the grossest matter. Prana pervades the whole living body of a man, but alone without having an atom to act upon, it would be quiescent. It is the action of Fohat upon a compound or even a simple body that produces life. The thread of life is the thread of Fohat. The spark that hangs from the flame by the finest thread of Fohat is the monad, in conjunction with Manas, or rather its aroma, that which remains from each personality when worthy, and hangs from the Atma Buddhi, the flame, by the thread of life. All cerebration and brain activity are attended by electrical phenomena. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier when I mentioned that if you think about the cosmos, you want to think about yourself. Your brain and the electrical activity in your brain is a lot like the cosmos in a lot of senses. The neurons that fire may be thought of as the stars and the cosmic elements that communicate to each other through the electricity that's inside your brain. Think of it as a smaller scale of the universe. And by doing this kind of stuff, we can learn more about the universe by understanding ourselves, and more about ourselves by understanding certain things in the universe. So, with that in mind, all cerebration and brain activity are attended by electrical phenomena. The combination of molecules into new forms and bringing about the new correlations and disturbance of molecular equilibrium is in general the work of and generates Fohat. All contains in his electricity, from the nettle which stings to the lightning which kills, from the spark in the pebble to the blood in the body. Electricity is the cause of the molecular motion in the physical universe, and hence also here on earth. The divine principle is eternal, universal mind. The gods, D and Cohen's, or periodical. Fohat is the force of the divine mind. That's what I was mentioning earlier. So we have the thought, and then the thought rides Fohat and so Fohat uses the patterns or the ideas, and it creates. It's the active force that creates the patterns that exist in divine thought. He is the synthesis of the seven and the intelligence of the seven creative builders, or as we call them, cosmocrators. In reality, there is only one force, which on the manifested plane appears to us in millions of forms. All growth depends on the indwelling force, because on this plane of ours, it is this force which alone acts consciously. The universal force cannot be regarded as a conscious force as we understand the word consciousness, because it would immediately become a personal God. It is only that which is enclosed in form, a limitation of matter, which is conscious of itself on this plane. This free force or will, which is limitless and absolute, cannot be said to act understandingly, but it is this one and sole immutable law of life and being. Fohat synthesizes all the manifesting forces in nature. He is the key in occultism, which opens and unriddles the multiform symbols and respective allegories in the so-called mythology of every nation, demonstrating the wonderful philosophy and deep insight into the mysteries of nature in the Egyptian and Chaldean as well as the Aryan religions. In India, Fohat is the scientific aspect of both Vishnu and Indra, in the latter older and far more important in the Rig Veda than this sectarian successor. In Egypt, Fohat was known as Tum, issued of Nut, space, or Osiris in his character of a primordial god, the creator of heaven and beings. Tum is spoken of as the protean god who generates other gods and gives himself the form he likes. He is the master of life, giving the vigor to the gods. He is the overseer of the gods, and he who creates spirits and gives them shape and life. He is the north wind and the spirit of the west, and finally, the setting sun of life, or the vital electric force that leaves the body at death. Where the defunct begins, that Tum should give him the breath of his right nostril, positive electricity, that he might live in the second form. Both the hieroglyph and text of chapter I don't know what that chapter is, of the Book of the Dead show identity of Tum with Fohat. Electricity cannot be generated from that which does not contain an electric principle or element. The electricity we handle is but the result of ordinary matter affected by something invisible, the ultimate generating power of every force, the one omnipresent influence. The day is fast approaching when it will be confessed that the forces we know of are but the phenomenal manifestations of realities we know nothing about, but which were known to the ancients and by them worshipped. These doctrines may not largely be accepted by the present generation, but during the 20th century they will become known and appreciated. Now, I know a lot of that was probably way over some of your heads, but the understanding, as you can see, goes way back into ancient times, and we can see just how important electricity is. Fohat is probably the most important principle. But what we have that we haven't come to realize yet is that there's this other force that's mentioned here in this, and it's called thought. It's called divine thought. It's called this ideation, or this understanding. We have this. In other words, things just don't randomly come into existence. That's the reason we have these things we have these certain archetypes, certain forms, certain shapes. We have these certain things that they're based off of a pattern or an ideation. So we have this invisible. We have these different planes of existence, and one of them is called divine thought. Now, when we think of divine thought, we can also think of this divine thought as being contained within the consciousness of a being. Just like you think of things and then you manifest and create those things, this kind of happens on different levels in the universe. So we have this cosmic ideation, and this goes all the way back into Plato as well, when we talk about the world of ideas and forms. Now, if you want a real world understanding of this and how it works, think of the Orion Nebula. And this is one of the reasons why I started paying attention to Blavatsky and Theosophy and stuff like this, because she was describing what I was hearing from the ancient philosophers such as Plato and people like this. And what she was describing what I was seeing when I was looking into the cosmos and trying to figure out why all these people were placing such an importance on the Orion Nebula. When we take a look at the Orion Nebula would be considered the sun. But is the sun or the offspring of thought? Now, this is mentioned in places like the Bible. We can see it in Colossians 1:15, where it says the firstborn over all creation is called the sun. So what occurred, is we have this what's called emanation. So from the invisible realm of thought, Fohat broke forth and used the pattern of that ideation to create the nebula. The nebula turns out to be a reflection of the invisible, and the nebula turns out to be the form or pattern of mind. Now that form or pattern of mind is then used to create the lower parts of the cosmos, including man. And if we take a look at all of the mysteries from Kabbalah or any of these other things, we see that man was formed after the heavenly man. That his form or pattern was based off of the heavenly man, and the heavenly man refers to the sun, which is the first that's born out of the infinite, which is what we see as the Orion Nebula. So that seems to be how this works. Is we have these patterns, these ideas, or these forms. They start in an invisible plane. They manifest themselves into the physical plane, and then things under them are created based off of their patterns as well. But we see that there are these levels of consciousness. And so just like we are one being that has many beings inside of us, and if you even take it like a neuron in our brain, if you've ever looked at a neuron in your brain, I think it's called it's a glial or something like this. Anyway, the whole neuron itself, from the nucleus at the top all the way down to the bottom of it, looks just like your brain all the way down to your spinal cord. So one neuron looks like your whole nervous system. So what you have is you have many neurons inside your brain that look like your whole nervous system. And so when we think of the Orion Nebula being this one being created out of the infinite based on a pattern, that Fohat, this electricity, is the force that, looking at the pattern, creates this first manifestation. The first manifestation being this one representation, which we call Adam, which we call the first man, and that is actually a collective unity of all of humanity. So all of humanity exists within inside that one being. These are hard concepts to put your mind around, but I hope that with this you learn something a little bit more about the depth of what the electric universe theory actually means. It's a lot deeper than just the mathematical concepts that draw upon things that we can observe. It goes much, much deeper, and it goes into layers of consciousness, cosmic ideation, and philosophical tones such as Plato and things that the ancients were showing us a long time ago. So you guys take care. I'll talk to you soon.